Salut tout le monde. Today is a live French lesson. Today is November 14th, and in the previous lessons we've looked at some of the vocabulary you could use for friends, family, describing where they're from, where they live, what their likes are and their interests, and in the singular and plural, and talking about yourself and talking about like language exchange partner. Today we're going to look at basic conjugations in the present tense. And getting like the big picture of what you need to know about those conjugations. And so I'm going to start sharing my screen here so you can see these tables that I put together here. So yes, you can see my screen here. So this is part of, for the French language, as it's a Romance language and Indo-European language, it has these first person, second person, third person singular and plural, and we have the je form tu, and then we have il, elle, and ça, which is like an it. So il is he, elle is she, and ça is like an it or a that. The we form is nous, and the vous form is a you formal or a you plural. So if you know Italian or you know Spanish, you may want to double check your understanding of how you're using vous. And then we have il and elle. These are the plural forms. You can't hear the difference between il, elle for he, she. It's just they have the letter S, but you don't pronounce the letter S on there. So the context can determine if you're talking about somebody singular or plural. And what we'll see here on the conjugations is that sometimes you cannot hear the difference for the pronunciation, because these verbs usually have the same sound. So the context is really important to help you understand if you're talking about somebody in the third person singular or third person plural. Okay, so we're gonna take a typical first group verb in French that ends with er, parler, and this is to speak or talk. And I have je parle, so I take off the r and I just have the e ending. I have the es, and that is the you informal singular, like tu parles. I have il, elle, and ça parle. So again, it's the same sound, parle, parle, parle. So this is why in French it's very important to use the subject pronoun, because if you don't use the subject pronoun, you can't tell based on the sound of the verb. In the spelling, you may not, I mean, you can see a letter S, but here je and il, elle have the same spelling. So it's important to add these subject pronouns, as opposed to languages like Spanish or Italian that might have a different ending and a different pronunciation. In French, you can't just, based on the sound of the conjugation, know who is doing the action. So that's why it's important you have to include the subject pronouns in here. When we get to nous, it's we have ons, and the vous form has ez here, and the ez form is pronounced exactly the same way as the infinitive with the er ending. So parler and vous parlez, so it's the same sound. And this il, elle, pluriel, the plural, they, is they speak, il parle. So just based on the sound of il, elle, ça parle, you can't hear the difference between il, elle, parle and il, elle, in the plural, parle. It's the same sound. So there's je parle, tu parles, il parle, elle parle, ça parle, il parle, elle parle in the plural. It's all the same sound. So that's why you have to use the subject pronouns with these nouns. These two other forms, nous parlons and vous parlez, those have those spelling differences. And if you're just based on the sound of the language of the conjugations, you have three things to worry about here. The infinitive, parler, which is the same as the vous form, vous parlez. And you have the je form, je parle, which gets repeated for je parle, tu parles, il parle, il parle. And then we have parlons. So if you have those three sounds, parler, parle, parlons, you get the full conjugation. You just need to know the spelling differences here, but we have E, ES, E, ONS, EZ, ENT, and the N is not pronounced. The NT is not pronounced, but it's there, so you know that we're talking about in this plural form. And we can get some of these questions here or statements. Je parle français. Je ne parle pas français. Est-ce que tu parles français? Or the inversion, switching the subject pronoun and the verb. Parles-tu français? So I could ask these to like somebody who's a friend, somebody my age. Est-ce que tu parles français? Or parles-tu français? If I was asking somebody formal, I would probably use est-ce que vous. I would swap this tu parles. I would put vous parlez. Est-ce que vous parlez français? Or parlez-vous français? For that. Okay. In the second group, this like the choisir is an example of a second group that ends with IR. And so on here we have choisi, 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 choisissons, choisissez, choisissent. So notice that an S by itself is a Z sound, and a double S, like you have in nous choisissons, the double S is a S sound. But one S is a Z sound. So I know, like for Spanish speakers who are learning French, if you do not necessarily use this kind of Z sound frequently in speaking, this can be a little difficult learning these conjugations or to pronounce them correctly. So we have here, you have the same ending here, je choisis, tu choisis. The spelling is exactly the same. The pronunciation is the same there. And we have choisi with a T at the end for the il, elle, ça, choisi. The pronunciation is the same as the choisi, choisi, but the spelling is different. And then for the nous and vous form, we have the ONS form again and the EZ form. And we have this ISS ONS, ISS EZ form. And for the third person plural, we have this ISS ENT form again on there. So that's typical of these IR endings. You have this ISS inserted. So we have ONS for the new form and EZ for the vous form. Okay. The third group, the RE ending group, it's also usually has some kind of irregular verbs in there, some unpredictable patterns sometimes. But vendre is one verb that is kind of typical of this, and comprendre, which is based off the verb prendre, to take, has these patterns. So in the first, in this first person, we have je vends, je comprends, tu vends, tu comprends, je vends, sorry, il vend, sorry about that, il, elle, and ça. This is live, so yeah, that might be a few mistakes, unfortunately, as I'm getting this worked up. So, il, elle, ça vend, il, elle, ça comprend, nous vendons, nous comprenons, vous vendez, vous comprenez, ils, elles vendent, ils, elles comprennent. So you have a different, here you can notice with comprendre ou prendre, we don't have the letter D in the plural of the like first person plural or second person plural or third person plural. The D drops out, and we have the comprenons, comprenez, comprennent. Whereas in vendre, we have the D that is everywhere in that conjugation. So prendre and comprendre, they are a little bit more irregular, and so be careful with these third group, this RE, they can be a little bit more unpredictable in there. But you have some of these expressions here like je comprends le français, je ne comprends pas le français, est-ce que tu comprends le français? And I was doing some research here about like why do we have le in front of the language? And most verbs like apprendre, comprendre, apprendre is to learn. We have this article in front of the language. It's just the verb parler that does not. And I was looking at this this one book on here from, for example, here the Everything Essential French book, and they have this alert here saying, remember that the verb parler, when used with this, the name of a language, does not take a definite article. One says je parle français, not je parle le français. This is a unique quality of the verb parler. Most other verbs will require an article when followed by a noun. And here are other examples of these kind of ER verbs. And you can find other resources that have lots of ER verbs like étudier, écouter, aimer, arriver, that are on there. Okay, and I would, whoops, just lost the Wiktionary link that I wanted there. Let me bring this back. And I'll put parler. So I'll go to the Wiktionary and I'll go over here French and I'll click the conjugation and I'll click show. And this is a table for these conjugations that you can use when studying French. And you also get the phonetics here. So we get parle, 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 parler and parle, and parlons for the nasal sound. And you can see here that the sound is the same for the il, elle pluriel, the plural, the he, she, il, elle singular, the tu form, and the je. Also, you can see here this J apostrophe. Sometimes when you have a verb that starts with a vowel sound, like avoir, or a silent H, like habiter, like with to live, or so in those cases, you get rid of the E and you contract the subject pronoun je with the verb, and you get je, j'ai, or j'habite. So that you need to remember that for some verbs that start with a vowel sound or a silent H. And you can see these tables for choisir. So you can see the pronunciation here: choisi, choisi, choisi. Over here, choisissent. So you have that sound, choisissent, and choisissons, choisissez. So those are separated. Okay. And we have like vendre, vend, 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 vende. You pronounce the D sound here, and vendons and vendez there. And overall, with the different tenses we have here, we have simple and compound tenses, and we have for the present simple, we have the imperfect, we have the kind of past simple, past historic, that's used mostly literary tense. It's not usually used in speaking. You have the future tense, you have the conditional, like I would speak, and I will speak for that. Where it says here, these compound tenses, you need to use a conjugation of the verb avoir, either in present or imperfect, or past historic, or future, or conditional. So you need to learn the verb avoir, and then you're combining it with a past participle for that. And then there's a subjunctive, which is very frequently used in French for the present and the imperfect, although the imperfect is not as used as frequently anymore. It is becoming a little bit more in writing, like where it says literary tense. So, but the present subjunctive, that still is used in the language, and you can see some of it is similar to this present tense conjugation, like parle, 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 but we have a mix here for the parlions, parlier, which is like based on some things from the imperfect, but you don't need to use that so much. And if there's a compound test, you're using the kind of subjunctive of the verb avoir. So you need to learn avoir, and you have the imperatives for like the tu and nouveau forms. So mostly in speaking, I would say you need to know like the present tense, the imperfect, the compound, like this present perfect, the passé composé is very useful, and some verbs in the passé composé use avoir as their auxiliary verb, and some use être as their auxiliary verb. But these are some patterns that you'll use typically for speaking. And there's also some ways that you can kind of get around these conjugations. I know if you conjugate the verb venir or the verb aller, to go, you can end up speaking in the kind of near past or the near future. And you can, so here are the conjugations, like to I speak, or I do speak, or I am speaking. All three of those are kind of covered by the usage here of this present tense. There's even the possibility of using the present tense to talk about the future, like a near future, like je parle avec lui demain, like I will talk with him tomorrow. Just by using the word demain, like tomorrow, you can express the fact that it will be tomorrow. There's even kind of a narrative where you could talk about something in the past as if it were a story. And you could say, okay, j'arrive, je parle avec lui, et je lui dis. So like I arrived, or basically I arrive, I speak with him, and I tell him, something like that. So you can, in some cases, get away with using the present tense as kind of a past tense narrative. That's sometimes happens in conversation. But if you know the present tense, it's a really important tense to know with these three groups in French. And if you can conjugate these other ones like venir and aller, you can use the present tense to talk about the near past and the near future as well. And anything else on here? In terms of the word stress, the word stress in French, it's always on the last syllable. So you don't have to learn too many strange word stress patterns. It's just the last syllable gets the stress on here. And if you're making the negative, as you can see in here, we have the ne pas, which kind of goes around, kind of like bookends around the verb here. And for making questions, we usually add these kind of est que, if it's like a yes or no question. And then later we'll get into question words like where, when, how, why. But for today, we're just looking at these basic conjugations so you can get started. And I would definitely recommend using things like the italki notebook entries, or recording yourself with something like SpeakPipe, and then sharing audio files and text files with native speakers to get feedback, or with a language exchange partner so they can correct you for your spelling or your pronunciation for that. But if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and I will relay these questions to native speakers so they can get more, give you more feedback on this. And yeah, definitely practice each day. The more you practice, the better you'll get. And the more frequent you do that, the easier you get to memorize these verbs. But for the French, you really want to practice seeing the pronunciation, because just based on the spelling itself, it may be a little confusing. So like in the Wiktionary, as you can see, there were the phonetics that accompany those conjugations, so you can see how they should be pronounced. But that's it for now, and we'll continue next week. So thanks for watching. If you like these videos, please like, subscribe, share, comment, and I'll continue producing content for you to work on your kind of basic understanding of these languages. So thanks for watching. Take care. Goodbye.